Take it away.
Okay. We're going to be talking about something very different than our core product. So for those that don't know Build is like a cloud-based PDM and a PLM system. We have a lot of automation underneath the hood. But today, the conversation that I'm going to be talking about is not our core product. It's a new feature and application that we just came out with. So the focus is bringing AI to design change management. Okay, before we start, so my name is Pradyut Paul. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders. Avinash is our CTO and our other co-founder. My background, I used to be a hardware program manager for iPhone hardware at Apple. Before that, I used to work at a Series B startup called Tracker. And then before that, I was an IC designer over at Raytheon. My co-founder, who does all of the tech and all the software, he used to be a senior software engineer over at Meta. Prior to that, Nextdoor, and then he used to be leading the iOS team over at Tracker, which is where I actually met him. So we're going to talk a little bit about the design engineering cycle. And really, the main focus is kind of over time, engineers, as they get different feedback and different inputs from cross-functional teams, that is the catalyst of different design changes. So we see kind of design changes starting by really four main buckets. So one is evolving requirements, so new specs and stakeholder needs if you're working with clients or if you're working with manufacturing. You're getting field failure data, so real-world performance feedback that might drive a design change order. Simulation outputs, so we've talked a lot about how AI is accelerating simulations. We're now getting faster feedback. That's going to drive different design changes. And then manufacturing test results, so production, inline test data, IQC, OQC, whatever you're getting some feedback, and that might drive different design changes. So now, more than ever, we are seeing more design changes that are happening at a faster iteration through that design development process. Now, what actually happens as a result of that? So we're seeing a lot of cross-functional ripple. All of these design changes eventually kind of get rolled into what we all know as an ECO process, right? And that ECO process is shared and can be involved with multiple stakeholders across manufacturing, supply chain, and finance and leadership. And everyone's going to look at these different design changes, and they're going to have maybe a very different perspective in terms of what they're looking at. They're going to understand and want to understand why did these different changes happen, what was the root cause, and then what is the end impact analysis. Now, oftentimes, that information is stuck in the designer's head. So if you are making a bunch of changes to a assembly or a CAD model, oftentimes only you know them. And the way that you communicate that externally is you use screenshots, you do design reviews, you're getting in meetings, you're kind of describing your work. And you, as an engineer, are becoming the bottleneck for information dispersed across the organization. So we kind of talk a little bit about some of the consequences. Single point of dependency. You've got delayed reviews, days of added cycle on every single change order. So we came out and we introduced our own model called Meru, which is a mechanical engineering reasoning unit. It's the first kind of AI multimodal model that's purpose-built to actually not just see what changed, but actually understand the design context and why the change happened. And the way we can do this is, actually we'll kind of come down to the way we can do it, but what we do is we do automated change detections. So we can ingest CAD revisions and we'll identify exactly what changed. We'll give you the contextual analysis of or annotations of why it changed as well. So we'll surface changes with rich human readable detail. And then that also then can get dispersed across functional teams. And now you're democratizing the information of not just what changed, but why changed from the engineer's head to everyone. On the right or on the left is a little bit of kind of what it looks like, and you can kind of visit our website. We've got a demo of this as well. But the product is not just kind of the standalone, let me kind of do a diff of two different revisions. It's fully integrated into Build. So what does this look like today? Designs are getting committed, so engineers are updating CAD. they're committing it into our PDM system. Meru, Delta, which is like the flagship kind of end user product, automatically identifies these different design changes. We fully annotate it. You don't need to do screenshots as an engineer. You don't need to write out detailed descriptions. Now you can obviously go and you can make changes to those annotations in case we get it wrong. We're about like at an 82% accuracy rate, depending on kind of what the different changes are. We then enrich your change order. So you've got a change order. That design is rolling up to a change order. We're enriching that change order with all this information. So now if you're on the manufacturing team, if you're in leadership, if you're in finance, and you are part of that review and approval process, all that information is instantly at your fingertips, and you can review and approve a design a lot faster. That then goes to that cross-functional review, and then the approval. So what we're really working on, shortening the time frame on, is once an ECO is started, how fast can it go through the review process and get closed? Under the hood, so this is kind of like how we're doing all of this. We are multimodal, so we're not just taking in your CAD data, we're taking in a variety of different inputs in order to like really understand what changed and why it changed. The first is we do have feature recognition, so we've been working very deliberately under the hood to use BREP data to actually understand what are the different features of your CAD model. We'll do like an array analysis, and then we'll actually find you the differences there. We look at your change history. Because we are a PDM system, because engineers are constantly committing different versions and revisions inside our system, we can actually look at how that design is changing. We have commits, so very much like Git, when you do a commit, you enrich that commit with what did you change. Oftentimes engineers don't use it, but when they do, they very kind of scarcely will put like 5 to 10 words kind of max. But we'll take that data and we'll feed it into our model. And then the last thing is CAD geometry relations. So we understand parent-child relations, but we also understand intersections of like actual geometry. So we can understand at an assembly level or on a system level, if you're making change to one component that drove a change to another component. Let's say you opened up kind of a slot hole, and then you increase the width of another component, that could have been kind of a relational change, right? Like, why did you increase the width of this component? Oh, it's because you increased the opening of another component. So we can actually take that information and we can create, not just on a part basis, what changed and why it changed, but on a system level basis, why it changed. And then we talked a little bit about commit messages here. So we've kindly silently launched this to early customers of ours. So we've got hundreds of customers that are on our PDM and PLM products. We now, over the last month and a half, have rolled out Meru to about half a dozen customers, and we're really trying to understand what are, what's the efficacy of our model, but then also like what are real world results? Like, how is this changing your day to day? So here's kind of what we're seeing. We're seeing a 60% reduction in cycle time from when the change order is created to when it actually is approved and released. So we're shortening that gap of how long a change order is open. And then we're surveying our different customers. On average, we're saving about 2.7, let's just say anywhere between 2 to 3 meetings for these change orders. So oftentimes, again, you're going to get into meetings, you're going to do these design reviews, you're going to highlight exactly what changed. You might get on a Teams or Zoom call. That's the kind of real world reduction that we are focusing on. These are early, the end goal for us as like a company and a product is how do we enable engineers to spend their time on high quality and high value efforts, take away the administrative workload of documenting whatever it is, right? Whether it's version history, what changed, why it changed. Like, our focus is how do we get the engineers to spend 90-95% of their time on core engineering work. We just launched this. It's been like a month and a half, but we've been working on it for a while. If you'd like to see a demo of this, feel free to contact me, but you can also visit our website at getbuild.com/Meru. It gives you kind of a good picture of what we're doing under the hood, what you can actually like see with Meru, and then we're happy to open up a sandbox environment for engineers to kind of throw their data in and actually kind of analyze the differences there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's anybody got questions for Pradyut about Build?
Yes, I do.
Here you go. Thanks, Courtney.
First of all, thanks apologize for showing up a little late. Deep discussion about AI and the use of errors and so on. So it looked like you were talking there, at least in the last thread, the change management process. Is that what the product is fundamentally focused on? Is sweeping through all change activities and determining what the delta non-recurring is, and here's that specificity, and then go vote on it?
Yeah, exactly. So if I go back a couple, the main focus is how do we surface up, and I'll show you this image here. So how do we surface up this information in terms of, as a person part of a change order process, maybe it's just getting sent to you at your desk and you're like, okay, I've got 18 different items that I have to review, right? And I might have to get into a meeting to actually understand what actually changed for each of those items from Rev B to Rev C. Sometimes they're fully annotated through like PDFs, Word documents, whatever it might be. The goal is how do we surface all this up without having engineers having to do that? And so we're using AI and then obviously a lot of deterministic automation under the hood to take that information and make that approval process just a lot faster.
And it also notifies all the impacted folks, right?
Yeah, so we don't automatically add the impacted folks to your change order. Like whoever creates the change order will add the different departments and the different teams. But then if you're part of a change order, it will notify everyone in that change order. And you might have I'll give you an example. So you may have different DRIs for different items, right, and owners. And so if you're part of that change order, you'll get notified.
Okay,
Yeah.
So one more quick follow-up. So if you're familiar with the ERAS configurator module, at least for 34, I'm not so much, but we're really interested in it. But if you're configuring, my experience comes from the Boeing company where you're selling a 777 or a 787. With a customer, how do you want it? Engines, avionics, what have you. I suppose that your product would work with that configurator and sweep through the baseline
It's all working.
e-bond that existed and say, well, this is what this customer wanted, here's the non-recurring to configure that particular outcome.
Yeah, so theoretically you could put, the actual feature, you could feed it any two models, right? And it could surface all of those changes inside that configurator. Right now it's embedded into our platform, but we're working with different systems. One of them is ERAS, to actually embed Meru into their life cycle.
That's cool.
Here you go, John.
Yeah, John Snow here. Just real quick question. I didn't see, so I'm wondering if you have any data on how big the problem is that you're solving. What's the downstream impact? What's the impact on cost of goods sold or delayed product release? Things that are going to, that the board of directors or that an investor would take note of. Say, okay, this is a real problem that's been overlooked. Someone non-technical.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Understand why it needs to be solved.
Yeah. So we oftentimes get into conversations and the engineering or the hardware organization is going to look at how fast can I get product out the door, right? And the faster I can get it in manufacturing, the more time you have in manufacturing, the more time you can get in test and analysis, the faster you can get your product to market. For us, it's always been focused on shortening that design cycle so you can get to manufacturing faster, so you can kind of do those next steps. So for us, so we have a customer, one of them, that we highlighted, they were spending 15 days. So once you initiate your change order, it takes about 15 days to close that change order. We've now reduced that down to about 8 days, right? So what does those extra 7 days give to you as an engineering or a hardware organization? For them, we can now either spend more time designing and we can be more confident, or we can take those 7 days and push in the back half and we can get to manufacturing faster. We'll get our information earlier. We can go and they're a med device company, so they can go and do FDA, certifications earlier as well. So time to value is going to be or time to market could be a big
Okay, I think you're missing an opportunity there.
Okay.
Roughly 25% of the products that we release to manufacturing.
Hope we'll see you later.
Pretty late in design.
Hope you see you later.
Yep.
About 25% of the products that are released to manufacturers, so they've approved them, get kicked back to engineering for redesign.
Sure.
So it may be due to failure to be able to be manufactured at cost, at time, at quality, but that hits the books so hard. And I just think you're missing an opportunity to clarify a really big number for people that they can relate to,
Mhm.
that every manufacturer can relate to and say, all right, here's a problem that I have that I wasn't really understanding the source of or how it traced through. So I'd encourage you to do a little bit more research maybe with some of the vendors and sort of trace that back. Because that's what's going to get an investor's attention. That's what's going to get the attention of the board within your manufacturers to say, or C-suite, to say, we need to solve this problem, and maybe Bild is a potential solution.
Yeah.
All right, to really expand that sort of sales process.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
an idea.
Yeah.
Maybe one more question, if anybody has one last question. Okay, well.